Hello, everyone, and I know you all are going to kind of file in here, so I'm not going to really get kicked off yet. But hello and welcome to just kind of episode of not really the Texas Pro, but just kind of me talking about Texas training camp, previewing Texas training camp, getting on here and talking about it before we go ahead and start Texas training camp tomorrow. I eventually I'm gonna get on here. That's kind of my last slide. I'm gonna take questions from y'all if y'all have any questions that you want to see answered. Definitely gonna get that going. I also plan on, kind of discussing some of the bigger issues or bigger things that people want to see moving forward, going into training camp. If y'all have any questions at any point, you can just drop them in chat and I will, get to them. Obviously, I'm kind of just on here just talking. Um, but yeah, I'm excited for Texans training camp. Obviously, lots to look forward to, a lot to be excited about. And I think there is a lot of excitement this year. Maybe not as much as last year because you had Stephon Diggs and some of the bigger acquisitions, but I think overall, I saw your list, Pat, I'm going to get to that for sure. I'm going to get to some of those, but obviously, I think the main issues that people are concerned about, which we can go ahead and get into it, is offensive line things. The offensive line is something that people are very interested to hear about, and I'm going to give kind of my thoughts going into training camp. New haircut, somewhat, somewhat. I've been cutting it shorter, so yeah. Let me get the chat to overlap. I did not add this in my slide. I just kind of upgraded my new or my restream, so I have that now. But yeah, all right. Texans offensive line talk. So I know everyone's that's kind of been the big talking point. Obviously, people want to hear about the offensive line. So some of my thoughts on the offensive line. I posted my list the other day about who I think ends up starting for the Texans on the offensive line. I think you go left to right. I think you go Cam Robinson. I think you go Lakin Tomlinson. I think center will end up being Jake Andrews. I think right guard ends up being Titus Howard, and I think right tackle ends up being Blake Fisher. Out of those five guys, I think you have some, three guys really that have been around. You kind of know what you're going to get in Titus Howard, Lakin Tomlinson, and Cam Robinson. Even though Titus Howard has never really played right guard, I think you can kind of know what you're going to get. He's going to be good in pass pro. He's kind of been very, he's been above average for this team for a good period of time, and I think he'll continue to do that at right guard. From talking with him earlier in offseason, he feels more comfortable in pass set actually from the right side. So right guard makes a lot of sense for him. Um, one of the things that you want to see from Titus that could really take him up to maybe a top 15 guard in the NFL would be, okay, can he run block better than he showed at the end of last season? Because overall in pass protection he was pretty good near the end of last year when he took over at that left guard spot. So if he can improve his run blocking, there's a real shot that he could be a real long term option at guard for this team. And maybe even if he's just a good pass protection guard, they want to keep him around. So there's a lot of options there. Um, if you want to look at a guy like Lakin Tomlinson, you know what he's going to get. I think you're going to get similar production. I've said this before. I think you're going to get similar production from Shaq Mason or from Lakin Tomlinson that you did with Shaq Mason. More 2023, hopefully, but I think you're looking at a similar player there. But you cut whatever amount of money signing Lakin Tomlinson instead of Shaq Mason. So um, too many pieces to expect a lot of pre-snap movement. We didn't budge last year. Um, I'll get into that, but I really don't know how much pre-snap motion. It's kind of interesting. I'm gonna get into that because I did see that comment. I think that's an interesting piece from you. I'm going to get into that for sure because I think my next point is Nick Caley on here. So whenever we get to Nick Caley, I'll get to that. But if you want to look at Lakin Thomas, like I said, I think similar production to what you got from Shaq Mason is pretty reasonable. Um, Lakin's a guy that's been around for a long time. He's played 1,000 snaps or higher since every year since 2017. So you kind of know what you're going to get from Lakin Tomlinson. He's going to be pretty average and start at left guard for 17 games. That's what Lakin's going to bring. He's kind of taking over as one of the leaders of the offensive line. Maybe not the leader because I think the leader is still probably Titus Howard with the in-house that he already has. But he's taken over as one of these guys where people are going to kind of take him, or he's going to take people under the wing, kind of teach some of these guys some things. So that he'll be an interesting piece for this team. So I think there's stuff to like with Lakin, and then Cam Robinson. Cam Robinson could not be a starter for this team. I don't see it happening, but I think I've seen people say, okay, Ursary maybe ends up. Uh, Shaq Mason was pretty bad. He was pretty bad, but Shaq Mason in 2023 was solid. I know you were. I know Drew, you were higher on Shaq Mason in 2023 than I was. But if you're looking at kind of I think you're looking somewhere, okay, probably in between those 2 years, maybe, for Lakin. I'm not super high on Lakin. I think this is kind of known. Um, but I think that's kind of what you're looking at, honestly. Hopefully hopefully he's better than I'm expecting. Cam Robinson, was solid in Jacksonville for a good amount of years. Obviously, I think he will be the left tackle of this team week 1 because that's what I predicted. But Ariante Ursary could be a guy that can compete for one of these tackle spots. But um, if I was to make a prediction, if Ursary was to start somewhere, it would probably be right tackle over Fisher. If I had to guess, I'm not all that high on Blake Fisher, although I would love to be wrong about Blake Fisher because Blake Fisher has a ton of tools to be a very good NFL player. I just am a little concerned about it. But I do think, he gets a little bit of a bad rep for how he played last year. I thought he was better than some people are giving him credit for. Um, he was bad against Kansas City, that's true. But I thought he was pretty solid against the Chargers. I thought he had some pretty decent games like Baltimore. So there are some things to like from Blake Fisher's tape last year. Um, and I think he will end up being this team's right tackle come week 1, but he's definitely not a 100% secured spot on the offensive line. Really, nobody is outside of Titus and Lakin, probably, if I had to guess, because I don't think Jake Andrews has a spot locked up, although I think he's pretty clearly the favorite to be. Uh, to be the center, but a guy like Jarrett Patterson could beat him out or someone like that. So, it's getting to Jake Andrews. I know Drew. We talked about Jake Andrews a little bit earlier, so I'm not going to harp on Jake Andrews too much. But there are a lot of things to like with Jake Andrews. He's very athletic. He's another guy that hasn't really taken a lot of snaps, so he has some upside to him. Um, there are some interesting things with Jake Andrews that gives you a lot of hope and gives you a lot of excitement. He definitely will help against the stunts that the Texans faced last year because of the athleticism. Um, so I think there are definitely some things to be excited about there. And there are reasons that he is going to probably be the starting center. Where Jarrett Patterson's the guy you kind of know what you're getting from Jarrett Patterson. He's a good pass protector that can't run block. Juice Scruggs, I don't even think he's in the picture really anymore. He might not even be on this team. So you know, some other guys on the offensive line that I think you kind of keep an eye on to compete for some spots. Zach Thomas is a guy that I think you should keep your eye on come training camp. Not that I think he starts anywhere, but I think he could be a backup at like 4 different spots. So that's very valuable. I think he will be a guy that you hear about somewhat in training camp and preseason. Let's see, what are some other names? Um, Jarrett Patterson's a guy that, if he can improve his run blocking, you're going to hear about is okay, maybe this guy does end up being the starting center. If he can, bulk up a little bit, kind of play more in this gap scheme, that's something that you will hear about come, preseason and training camp. Some other guys, let's see. Depth at tackle, you're looking at kind of Austin Decklius, I believe, is still on the roster. Um, there's enough guys there. They definitely have offensive line options. They're not short with offensive line options. So there are a lot of versatility, a lot of different ways you can conduct this offensive line that maybe they end up doing it like that, or maybe they're kind of sit back. Eli Cox is the guy that I know people have talked about, not all that high on. I'm also not that high on Ladarius Henderson, who's the guy that I know people or some people have liked. Um, Ed Ingram's a piece that they added in the offseason. I'm not super high on Ed Ingram, but as a depth guy, he's okay. He started games before, so there's something there possibly. Jalen Thomas is the guy that I want to say was a bigger idea, and Trent Brown. Trent Brown got cleared, so he could be a potential swing tackle piece. Um, but Jalen Thomas was the guy that was playing inside and outside in minicamp and OTA, so he's the guy to keep your eye on for some versatility on that group. I think Declius ends up getting cut. That's going to be something interesting that we do Texans Pro wise is kind of getting to our 53-man rosters and kind of cutting down a certain group, especially the offensive line room, because that's probably the most interesting one. Um, Definitely, not probably. That is 100% the most interesting group on this team. So, to kind of be able to look at that and say, okay, this guy's out playing this guy. Because there's a lot of guys that can play a lot of different positions for the Texans currently. And that's what they're going to have to decide is like, do they value the versatility of a guy like Juice Scruggs, or do they, want just the guy who's maybe just better at a spot? There's a lot of different ways to kind of go about it. So we're going to have to see how the Texans approach it. And, I'm excited to see how that goes come camp. And, moving on to the next point, a lot of this is going to be decided by what the Texans like want to do with Nick Caley. Um, Oh, here. Okay, we'll get to this point. Who's got the attitude though? Going to be a tone setter. The tone setter seems like they want it to be like in Tomlinson. I've kind of seen, he can do some of this physical downhill stuff, but I'm not 1,000% sure that he has, kind of the mentality that they're thinking he has. But D'Amico knows him better than I do, so at the end of the day, I'm not 100% sure on that. But that seems like the guy that they want to kind of take over that role. Um, coming into camp, kind of be this guy that, okay, he can show them the way. But, he's a guy that's played, like I said, he plays a ton of snaps. He's almost always out there. So there's definitely a certain level of, okay, we kind of believe he can do this and he can show these guys the way. Okay, let's go. How do I get that? I don't know how to get that back up. Wait. I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a process. I'm kind of trying to figure all this out. There we go. I got it. Okay. I'm figuring all this new stuff out, guys. So this was kind of just a test stream, kind of getting to talk with you guys. But Nick Caley's offense, there is a Texan going to Texan who's in the chat was kind of talking about this earlier. So Caley did a lot of RPOs. Do you expect that to be an offense? That was kind of one of his questions. For me, I think it's going to look similarly to a Josh McDaniels led offense if I had to make my guess. And before, I get it. Josh McDaniels wasn't a good head coach. Josh McDaniels is a good offensive coordinator. Vegas's offenses when he was there were solid offenses. He had pretty good numbers offensively there. He just isn't a good head coach. So there's definitely reasons to be optimistic about having the New England type of offense. Bill O'Brien was a little bit different. Bill O'Brien Um, never really ran this New England type of offense. He kind of changed it a little bit for Deshaun. Deshaun had a lot of RPO stuff in the offense. Deshaun had more, shotgun than you would expect. I think what you're going to kind of see from the Texans this season with Nick Caley is a lot of under center, a lot of we're going to try to run gap, we're going to just pound downhill, and then try to hit play action off this because the Texans were pretty good off play action last year, even when they didn't run the ball that well. So if you can expect like Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb and Woody Marks and the offensive line to improve along with a new run scheme, I think there are reasons to believe that the Texans can be a very good play action team. And Stroud, he does well in play action situations. He moves well, which is a big part of it, and he reads defenses at a high level. So you're able to turn your back to the defense, get back there, look, and they had a lot of big plays off of play action. So that's definitely something to look forward to. I'll get more in it, but I do have a question. There was a question in chat. So, have I ever played football before? I've never played football. This is something I've talked about. Um, I played like flag and stuff, but I never actually played football. I don't know if any of y'all have like. I know Drew has. I'm way too skinny. I don't put on weight. I'm like 5'10" and I weigh like 140. I am all skin and bones. So football was never in my cards. I played basketball. I played baseball. I was better at basketball. I wasn't all that good at baseball. I couldn't hit. I was good in the field. Like I had a good arm, but that was it. But no, I've never really played football. I've always like enjoyed watching football. And I enjoy playing like backyard football, but I never played like on a football team necessarily. Um, I've talked about this before, but up until about 2020, 2021, I was way more into basketball. Like basketball was my thing. The Rockets, I still love the Rockets, obviously, but I was way more into basketball at that point. And, I kind of more recently transitioned towards football. So, it's something that I really, really like. Um, and I really enjoy watching. And, from people that have known me for a couple of years now, I've like, you could talk with them. I really have worked hard to kind of understand football more and there's still a lot for me to learn, coverage wise and all that. But I have done a lot, film study and different things to, kind of get more familiar with football and, it not sound like a total idiot when I'm talking. Deshaun was more mobile, like, like the idea of pocket with pre-snap options. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I think you're going to see more stuff from the Texans pre-snap with more control for the quarterback. And this was something that Bill O'Brien did with the Texans as well. There's a lot on Deshaun's plate, pre-snap, post-snap. There was a lot for him to do, and I think CJ Stroud's gonna be similar. And I think Stroud will have a lot of success in that type of offense. It's not guaranteed that he's going to be good with more control like that, but I think he is a smart quarterback, and I think he does good. I think he, reads defenses well. I think he sees stuff well, so I think he will. It may be an adjustment period. This is something I've talked about with Nick Haley for a while. I don't think it's fair to say, okay, these first 5 games before the bye, I don't think it's fair to be like, if we're not playing as a top 10 offense at this point, you're out on him. I get people don't like offensive coordinators, so people are probably going to do it. But I'm more okay. Like let him have the first 5 weeks. Let's see what happens. Unless it's a complete disaster. But like first 5 weeks, I'm okay with some ups and downs. You get the bye week, and then you come out. That stretch is going to be where Nick Haley's season is really made. If they can come out of the bye, win 4 in a row, they look like a good offense. That's where Nick Haley is really going to. You're really going to see the impact of Nick Haley, I believe. So that's definitely something that you should look and you should expect. I'm going to continue to talk about this as the season progresses because you can only do so much in preseason and camp. What's up, Barrett? How we doing, man? There's only so much you can do in this offseason period and the training camp and preseason for Nick Haley and the new offense. There's not you can't necessarily replicate defenses you're going to see and different packages that you're going to see. So it's going to be a process. It's going to be a process towards during when the season actually happens for Nick Haley. And like I said, the first 5 weeks, it's going to be experimental. You're going to see some things that maybe they don't stick with all season. But really, the biggest thing is just adjusting. Okay, this didn't work. We're going to go away from this and we're going to change what we're doing. And that's what you didn't see from a guy like Bobby Slowick that I think you're going to see from Nick Haley. And I'm very optimistic with Nick Haley. I'm just saying that I don't think it's fair to say, if they lose to the Rams week 1 because they didn't have a good offensive game, it's like, okay, we're going to be out on Nick Haley. But I know people are going to do it. So I get it. It happens. But continuing to talk about Nick Haley's offense, it's going to be a hybrid. Like, there's definitely going to be some of these West Coast themes that you've seen. Although Sean McVay has not necessarily been the biggest West Coast guy lately, he's definitely kind of changed his offense. They run a lot more gap in general, which is what you're going to see from the Texans' run game, I believe. Um, so I think you're going to see similar things to what you were seeing there. And some of these New England, obviously, I think it'll be a lot of New England stuff, which again, I've talked about it. I don't think New England offensive coordinators are bad necessarily. Bill O'Brien does, like I said, he's not the typical New England guy. Like we've kind of talked about this. But this has been talked about before, but he changed his offense a little bit. It was still had this kind of similar wrinkles, run game wise, but it was a lot more shotgun and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily think it's going to look that similar to Bill O'Brien, but it'll look similarly. It just won't be like a one for one replica. There's going to be different things because they have different players, and they have different skill sets. DJ Stroud's not the same type of quarterback Deshaun Watson was. They were both very good quarterbacks in their time here, but they're just not the same type of players necessarily, and they don't have the same type of strengths. So you want to adjust to what that is, and I'm sure Nick Haley knows that. Nick Haley's not an idiot. None of these offensive play callers in reality are idiots. Bobby Slowick, did a lot of dumb things, but he's a very smart football guy. They all are, and I'm sure there's things that Nick Haley wants to do that. Okay, in LA we just did things differently because you have different type of players. You had Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup who are more inside. They want to work kind of the middle of the field. Now you get a guy like Nico Collins who can kind of do everything on the football field. So it's just different skill sets that can change offenses different ways. And a big part of New England's offenses for forever, and not necessarily with the Rams, but Higbee was kind of a big piece with the tight ends. I don't really think the tight ends will be that involved this year. I think they're going to go more to the slot guys. I think Dalton Schultz will probably have, if he has 500 something yards, um, that would be good. I don't know what to expect from the tight end group. I think Kate Stover and Brevin Jordan have upside. I just don't necessarily know what you're going to see from them. I don't know what the expectations to put on them are because I'm not sure if we're going to see a lot of tight end usage or little tight end usage. You might see a lot of two tight ends, but are you really throwing them in a pass game? I don't know. That's kind of what I'm going to have to see. That's something that you can take away from these OTAs and training camp or training camp and preseason is what type of formations and packages are you going to see? That's something that you can take away compared to some of the other things that you can't with play calling and other things. Worst play calling in 10 years, pretty damn bad. Yeah, Bobby Selleck was a bad play caller, no doubt about it. Um, they're just, all these football guys are smart. Some of these guys just don't know. They don't know how to put it in reality, if that makes sense. They don't know how to like take it from the play. They don't know how to take it from the whiteboard and put it in the game plan. Like that's the biggest thing for all these guys. Everyone, Bobby Slowick is probably if you were in a room with Bobby Slowick and he drew up a play on a whiteboard, you would probably like you would not you'd be like that one's going to work 10 out of 10 times, and it doesn't in game. There's just different things. but that's something that, like that's just how play calling is at the end of the day. Um, I feel like Haley will run a lot of tight end heavy formations. He could. He absolutely could. I'm interested to see. I'm a little bit convinced that they won't do as many as I think, um, because of I because I think that they're gonna prioritize these slot guys. I think Christian Kirk's gonna get a lot of targets. I think Jalen Noel's gonna be a big impact guy come week 12, probably like later on in the season. Jaden Higgins, I think, is gonna be a guy that plays in the slot too. I think this is a reality that people don't realize. I think Jalen Higgins is gonna play out of the slot a good amount. I think he's a weapon in the slot. And he isn't really like one of my pet peeves. I don't really like player comps in general. I don't make player comps all that much, but the Nico Collins to Jaden Higgins comp, they don't really have that similar of a play style to me. They have similar builds, but they don't really do the same type of things. Like Nico is way better at catch point. He's way more physical. He's got more speed. I think Jaden Higgins really is a bigger weapon in the slot and can work over the middle and do that type of stuff, almost like a tight end would. That's kind of my point. Is if you can have this guy that works that type of area, um, and I said the exact same thing with Xavier Hutchinson, which is why I'm somewhat optimistic about him staying on roster and being a bigger slot guy. Alongside alongside Higgins, is I think that's the best role for those kind of guys. I don't think Hutch has never been a guy at the catch point that's going to go and make plays like when he has to fill in as the X. He just isn't that guy. But he's not a horrible player. He's not a horrible player. There are things he can do. He's a pretty good blocker. So you get him in the slot. What the Rams like to do a lot of is they use kind of Puka and these guys as like inserts in the run game. They'll insert him and they'll pull him to kind of block a linebacker. The Texans can do that with a guy like Jaden Higgins or or not Jalen Noel, but Xavier Hutchinson or even Nico Collins in the slot because they have that type of versatility now on offense. Um, but I do think the Texans will use a lot of tight ends. I just don't know if they're going to be big usage in the pass game. I think you're going to see more of them in the run game. I think Brevin Jordan. That's why I believe in Brevin Jordan this season is because I think he is probably the best blocker out of out of the tight ends. And so if he can get involved in the run game like that, that'll probably be where he makes a lot of his money. Along with Cade Stover and Irv Smith, who also showed some decent things in the blocking game. And Dalton Schultz 2023 Dalton Schultz could block. He showed some things of decent blocking. He's not a great blocker. He's never been a great blocker, but he shouldn't be as bad as he was last season in the blocking game. Okay, let's go. Let's go with one more topic that I want to discuss. I'm kind of saving some of the stuff for the Texans Pro because I don't want to completely talk about everything when we're going to have, obviously stay tuned for that. We're going to have Houston Stressens and obviously Drew is going to be on. Um, that's definitely going to be exciting. So expectations for year three, CJ Stroud. This is, I mean, probably the top thing that people are going to talk about outside of the offensive line is what are you going to get from CJ Stroud? CJ Stroud had a down year for a lot of last year, and there's very valid reasons for that. And I don't have a lot of concerns about CJ Stroud, but I don't also think I'm not 100% sure you're going to see this type of CJ Stroud MVP season that maybe some people expect or want. I'm sorry, but I don't know. I I I got this air blown, so I got but clarified. I mean, yeah, tight end heavy in the run game. You're probably going to see that. Um, but yeah, so I think you're going to see a lot of CJ Stroud. Maybe we'll have a big yard total. I just don't know if the touchdown total is going to be huge. I think you're going to see more focused on the run game and kind of managing clock. Because I think the Texans are going to believe so heavily in their defense this season, which obviously very valid. You go look at that defense, and there's a very valid reason for them doing that. But I don't necessarily think you're going to see CJ Stroud have like a 40 touchdown season, right? I think you're going to see I think you're going to see closer to 30. I think you're going to see, probably high 20s, low 30s in touchdowns. Like that would be my expectation. If all goes well, the offensive line steps up. Like that would be that'd be my goal for him. And then having, low interceptions. Really, he hasn't been a big turnover guy at any point in his career. So I don't see that continuing to happen. He's been middle of the pack in turnover worthy plays. Um, and he's gotten some good luck, but last year he also had some bad luck with interception luck, especially middle of the season. So that's something that I think that you should kind of expect. I don't think he's going to be top three in MVP voting, I think you're going to see a very efficient. Like I said, the ideal situation for him would have a similar season to what Justin Herbert did last season, where we're just not turning the ball over, we're not throwing a ton of touchdowns, um, but we're able to kind of just manage games well and throw touchdowns when we have to and make big plays when we have to, but just not turn the ball over. That is what I think the Texans staff would want to see from CJ Stroud effectively. And that's a good point from Jack here. Would like to see the Texans uses or would like to see him use his legs more. I think everyone would. I think his legs are a big part of the offense, and if he can continue to be a productive guy with his legs like he was in the playoffs, that's a huge thing for the Texans offense. I think it's why he kind of bulked up in the offseason. Um, and I think you're going to see him use his legs more and more as it progresses because I think he's going to kind of be forced to. I think that would be a huge part. He's always kind of been mobile. He's always has done a good job. Um, he's always done a good job making plays like outside the pocket. Really he kind of is living off this pre-draft like he's a pocket passer. I don't think he's a pocket passer at all. I think he's actually better outside of the pocket than he is in the pocket throughout his 2 seasons. He's one of the best play extenders in the NFL. Um, so, just look to take your yards when you can take your yards. He's always kind of done it in bigger games. If you look back, Jacksonville from 2 years ago, the game where they lost because Amendola kicked it short. That was a game where he used his legs a lot because he had to. It was a big game. It was a huge, like a big moment. So he used his legs more. He's always kind of done that. He saves his legs for the big moments, and I think that's gonna stay. I don't think he's gonna just like all of a sudden become this, huge rusher. But I think pick your spots. Like 3rd and 10, go get yourself 11 yards. And like you said it in chat too. You just need to learn how to slide. I'm cool with it. I think he needs to do it. What he needs to do a better job of is either learn to slide or just go head first. I would tell him like just dive head first. I think that's the best way to do it. I said that for a while. So I would just do that more. But if he's gonna try to continue to slide, then he's got to figure out how to slide. Um, but I think what he did in the Kansas City games, go just lower your shoulder, just like go down. Essentially, that's my approach on it always. So, um, something like that would be something that I would expect. But if he can have a season where he throws 29 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, he has 4,000 yards, a little bit over 4,000 yards, and the Texans win 12 games. Very good season for him. I'm not expecting him to. He doesn't need to be this guy that is like just dominating games. He's not going to be Lamar Jackson. Like that's not who he is. But if he's going to be could be very efficient. He's got very good arm talent. Like you said, if he can use his legs more, he can get out and run. Um, there are reasons to believe in that being the reality of like what he can be. And I think there's very valid reasons to believe he can be a 40 touchdown guy. I just don't think in this offense that's what they want him to do. And he's not really going to be able to do it with the offensive line they have in place. Like I just don't think that's a reality this season. Um, um, so that is something that I expect, coming this season. But eventually, I do think he can be this guy that can be an MVP candidate. I think he's that good of a quarterback. Um, for sure, he was making plays and still making plays, which is hard to do. Yeah, like I said, the Tennessee game was one of my favorite games on film for him all year. I know they lost that game, but he made some throws in that game that were exceptional. Like it sounds like Denver last year. Denver is kind of a weird one. I'm not a big Bo Nix believer, so I think CJ Stroud's 10 times better than Bo Nix is. But yeah, you could replicate that if you want to do something like that where you have a very good defense and you're able to run the ball. I just don't know if they're gonna be able to run the ball as well as Denver did. But something like that would be very ideal. Um, and here I will lay out. I know. Texan put in chat or you sent them to me earlier. I'm gonna read out some of your questions that you had. Um, let me see. Let me find that, and we will. Okay, here we go. Kaylee did a lot. So I already talked about that. I'm not necessarily expecting a ton of RPOs. I think you're gonna see more New England stuff than the Rams, but I think you'll see some RPO stuff. I think if CJ uses his legs more, that's definitely like an avenue to say, okay, we're gonna do more RPO. He did a lot with tight ends. we haven't before. That's pretty true. The Texans like to use tight ends last year, though. It just wasn't good. The Texans went heavy with tight end usage last year. It just wasn't effective. So I think you're going to see less tight end usage, honestly. I think you're going to see less in the pass game, but maybe in the run game, you see an uptick. You see more tight ends kind of lead blocking. And the biggest thing for the run game for me with the tight ends is we're going to see how much they want to use their tight ends in the run game if they want to keep a fullback. Like, if they keep a fullback, that to me signals like, okay, we're going to rely more on the fullback than the tight ends and run blocking, which would be probably Jakob Johnson. So, you know, that'll be a big tell when we get to preseason, when we get to training camp, is like how much is he being used compared to the tight ends. Um, yeah, I think that's a very interesting one, though. I think the tight end usage will be good. Aziz and Toa got a lot of talk. I love Petrie. Who's going to dominate the linebackers this year? Aziz will pretty clearly be the linebacker one. The second linebacker, that is probably the single toughest question for me of who's going to be that second linebacker. I'm hoping it's Christian Harris. Like, that's my hope. I think he's the best schematic fit with Aziz Al-Shahir. I think it makes the most sense. Um, I would bet on it being Harris. I think I would bet on it just because I think that just makes the most sense schematically. I think Harris is the guy that they want to play that they want to play that role. I just don't know if that's going to be him, but I'm hopeful that Harris can be, he can play at that level that you saw at the end of 2023. So that would be my hope. But yeah, Jalen Petrie, love Jalen Petrie. One of my favorite players on this whole team. And once and for all, Davis Mills is not trash. Settle it. I have talked about Davis Mills on here. I appreciate Davis Mills, what he's done for this team, and what he was going to continue to do for this team as one of the better backups in the NFL. Like, that is what he is, and he's very good at what he does. So no complaints about Davis Mills for me. I hope Davis Mills stays on this team for forever, like however long he wants to stay. Because when CJ Stroud sits out, or if he has to miss a game or something, like, I feel pretty decent with Davis Mills out there. Like, not great, but you should never feel great with any backup quarterback, more than likely. Like, I feel better about him taking the field than I would, if the Texans had a backup like Gardner Minshew or a guy like that. That's just how I would feel. I know some people disagree with that, and that's totally fair. I tend to disagree with the Davis Mills hate. I'm on the Davis Mills hype train, man. I like Davis Mills. What do you think the running back room will look like? I think you're going to see more split carries. I think you're going to see more of three running back usage, and I think the three will be um, Mixon, Chubb, and Woody Marks. I think those three are the guys you're going to see. I think Damian Pierce makes the team with a special teamer and a returner and a guy that you can use on some, running situations. I think that is where you're going to see him, but I don't think he necessarily makes it into this kind of cut over like a guy like Woody Marks. So, um, but Nick Chubb's the guy that I'm gonna be watching in training camp because I think he could be a guy that would be a surprise cut. Like, if he doesn't play well, I don't think he's guaranteed to make this team whatsoever. But I hope it works out. I hope he's 80% of what he used to be because boy, oh boy, that would be pretty awesome. I just don't think you're gonna see Joe Mixon take as many carries as he did last year, like have 30 carry games, because that cannot continue to happen without the age of him and his injury concerns. Um, that can't continue to happen. So other guys are going to have to take carries. They're going to have to figure out some guy that can spill some carries, take 5 or 10 in a game, and some other guy can take three. Like, that's what they're going to have to do in the running back room, I believe. Um, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for camp. If y'all have any more questions, go ahead and drop them because I'm not going to stay on here for too much longer. Um, like I said, I'm trying to keep some stuff for the Texans probe coming up. I'm very excited for camp. Obviously, I'm gonna be. Hey, make sure y'all follow all of my social medias, especially the X and the Instagram. I don't know, people, if you're watching on YouTube or whatever. Make sure y'all go follow that because I'm telling you right now, I'm gonna be up to date with this content. I'm gonna be at almost all the training camps that are open, and the ones that aren't open, I'm gonna be posting clips. I'm gonna be posting all that. So make sure y'all stay tuned for that. I know, like I said, if y'all ever see me at a camp or whatever. Come over, say hi. Like, I'm cool with, like, I always talk with people. So if y'all ever want to come say hi or whatever, you watch like the content or whatever, come say what's up. Next Texans probe Thursday at, I want to say 4 p.m. 3 or 4 p.m. I don't exactly remember, but it's me. It's Drew and Houston Stressens. So we're gonna be talking about Texas training camp. We'll be 2 days in. We're gonna be kind of discussing what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and kind of previewing, preseason and everything like that. So that'll be definitely a longer one. This is gonna be like 35, 40 minutes. That one will be a little bit longer, more in depth. This was kind of just a quick one. Kind of honestly me testing out my new upgraded restream and everything, kind of making sure that I got everything going here. So like I said, I appreciate everyone for tuning in. If y'all have any last questions, I'll sit here for a little bit. We can continue to kind of just if y'all have any more, just drop them or whatever, and we'll so for Davisville, you said three teams he could start on today, maybe four. Trying to think of what teams he could start on. Like, are you starting him on? I don't know. I'm having trouble thinking off the top of my head with the quarterbacks. There's definitely some teams that have bad quarterbacks, so I just can't think of them off my head. But yeah, he probably could find a way to start on some teams, like Cleveland. I think he starts on Cleveland currently. Um, who else? Am I missing certain teams? Raiders? No, Geno's Geno's a stud, man. He ain't starting on the Raiders. Geno's like that. I'm assuming you forgot that they have Geno because Geno's like that. Geno's nice. Colts? Maybe Indy. I'm kind of a believer in Anthony Richardson still a little bit. I know that's kind of a hot take, but I just feel like his impact on the run game would probably lean. Giants isn't a bad. I'm sorry, I don't know why I disconnected. My Wi-Fi sucks sometimes. Giants isn't a bad idea though. He maybe could start there for right now. I could see that. Um, what are some other teams? What are some other teams? Sent goons after you praised Gino. Dude, I'm a big Geno fan, so I think the Raiders are gonna be a sleeper team. I've talked about this. I think they're gonna be good this season. Possible 10-win team. I'm telling you. Don't sleep on my Raiders this season, man. That's a tough division, though, so they might not win 10 games, but they're gonna be solid this year. Um, any other any other things that we're thinking of, or I'll go ahead and head out if that's it. Pitt. Um, I still would probably think Rodgers would start, but yeah, maybe. Like Aaron Rodgers is not very good anymore, so maybe. I would think Rodgers would probably beat him out though. um, Mills is definitely improved though. From like early on Mills to now, he's definitely gotten better. All right, see you, man. Yeah. So that's probably gonna wrap up this stream. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. It's kind of just a little shorter one. Get to talk about some Texans training camp and everything. Yeah, like I said, make sure here. I'll pop. Let me pop up that graphic before I head out. Yeah, like I said, make sure you follow Texas Jacob on like all the social medias. X, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch. I don't really stream I stream on Twitch kind of randomly. Like I said, I had to stream with Titus, but then I'll stream like some college football or probably Madden when it comes out. So, if you ever want to just chill, I'm sometimes on there. But like I said, I appreciate everyone.